Hello and welcome back to the Polarity podcast, the show where an RTD fanboy and an RTD critic discuss the Russell T Davies era of Doctor Who. My name is Lewis.
And my name is Gav.
And we're on to a biggie. This one is episode 6 of series 1, Dalek, the biggie. This one is the turning point for the series. I said last week there is a distinct era of series 1. There's before Dalek and after Dalek. This is the turning point for the series where things get a bit darker, a bit deeper, a bit grimmer. So I think it's a big episode for many reasons, But Gav, starting us off, I think it's going to be an interesting discussion this episode because you have a little bit of a history with this, new series Daleks as a whole.
Well, yeah. How do I put it? So I've been trying to think all day. I've been scratching my head. What's the most diplomatic way I can discuss this episode? Because it's all well and good me turning around and saying, yeah, I don't like it. But what I think maybe the better description is I appreciate the merits and I appreciate a lot of moments in it, but it's just not for me. And a big part of that is things like the design and the visuals. That really irks me in this episode, but just in general I have got my issues with it. But yeah.
Okay, well, on the opposite. No, I think that's fair enough, though, to be fair. If it's not for you, it's not for you.
Yeah, I don't want to say it's not bad, is it? It's not a terrible episode, it's just, yeah.
On the complete opposite side of the spectrum, this is, I think, one of the all-time greats, not just from new series, from all of Doctor Who.
Jesus.
I think it's near perfect way of reintroducing the Daleks to a modern audience. I think there's some very almost meta elements to the episode in the way it comments on people's perception of not just the Daleks but also the Doctor Who show, because that's what it's called. It's called the Doctor Who show. But it's a crime that Rob Shearman has not written for telly. Well, he's written for telly, but not written for TV Doctor Who ever again after this, because it's good. It's amazing.
Yeah, I mean it's Jubilee, but not as good, is it? I mean, it's not to say that Shearman isn't doing a good job on it, but it's just like when I watch this episode, there are some really great moments in it in terms of the writing and what Shearman's done with it. And it's clear that there's a strong script there. And I like a lot of what's going on, but it's thematically like a very bare bones version of Jubilee, I feel. I feel it doesn't have the character and quirkiness he brought to that script, which of course Dalek is directly adapted from. Or yeah, you could say adapted. I think that's a fair description. And it's just, I don't know. It doesn't have the original script has so much like energy and uniqueness to it, and it's got such scope and such I don't know. It's such a beautiful study, really, and it does everything that Dalek does, but even better. Because I mean, I think it's fair to say one of the great strengths of this script is that the way the Dalek is characterized is genuinely beautiful. And I think that holds true for both Dalek and Jubilee. But in Jubilee, I feel it just a little bit more. Do you know what I mean? And everything like that. So the best bits of this episode are even better in Jubilee. And the bits that don't hold up so well in Dalek are just done really well in Jubilee anyway. So Jubilee's just all across all boards really great. Whereas Dalek's more patchy and not as complete, I don't think.
See, I much prefer it to Jubilee.
Really?
I like Jubilee, but in my opinion, this is tighter. It's got more emotional weight to it. It's got more impact in the long run for the Doctor's arc and his character. It's funny you say directly adapted, because I remember when I first listened to Jubilee, obviously after I'd watched the TV story. And to be honest, I think there are obviously elements throughout the whole story that are similar, but really I think the big thing that this adapts from Jubilee is the scene with the big, probably the most iconic scene of the episode, when it's just the Doctor and the Dalek in the room.
Yeah.
I think that's really the only thing that it's directly adapting. I think the rest of it kind of takes elements from Jubilee and then just kind of changes it and quite a bit. So yes, it's not like a Human Nature scenario where that is a direct adaptation of the novel. Again, with things change, but like that's more closely an adaptation, right? That's firmly an adaptation of a novel. This, I think, is more. It takes elements from his Big Finish story, Jubilee.
Yeah,
but it's not a direct adaptation. I don't think. Anyway,
I think obviously, like, when we talk about this sort of, when you make the link between these two episodes, you are right. There is a lot that is present in one that is not in the other. So obviously there's no Henry Van Staten in Jubilee. There's no base in Utah in Jubilee. There's no Time War in Jubilee. But what there is there's a story that's a deconstruction of British nationalism and ideas of, our monarchy and how we present ourselves and the value of our kingdom, as it were, quote unquote, our empire. And so there is still an idea of kind of an illusory power, which is existing in both. So obviously Van Staten kind of holds this very, at the beginning of the episode, you've got this, he's written to be kind of this big kind of everything that's going on in the world, he's making it tick. The internet, politics, everything. But by the end of it, he can basically be eliminated like that with what is basically democracy. Everyone in his base has said, actually, we don't like you, and we decided you should be the one who gets chucked out. So in a way, there's that kind of this kind of that idea of kind of false power, which exists in both stories. I just think that Jubilee's a slightly better version of that.
But I would argue that Jubilee that's its soul, that's its intention from the off. Like, that's its main purpose as a story. I think that's its main idea that it's presenting, is that whole idea. Yeah. Whereas Dalek that's more of a subplot than anything. The main meat of Dalek is the Doctor and the Dalek. That the two races meeting each other for the first time after the war, and the kind of character stuff that comes from that. So although, like you said, that element is in there, I just think it's a different intention overall, which makes me think, which again is what I said earlier, I just think it's although it takes elements, it is very different because it's just it's doing something different than Jubilee. Yeah, and obviously this isn't a comparison point, more just a kind of opinion point, but I do think that to my mind anyway, I think actually that the story of the Doctor meeting the Dalek isn't as strong as the story about the nationalism and false power. I think it's not. It's like okay. I think it's like interesting because obviously you've got that classic line of like, are you as bad as the villain? Whatever. But it's not exactly groundbreaking. Whereas I think Doctor Who is one of those very unique shows that can really present something like the power storyline really uniquely and really effectively, and it does in both versions, just slightly more, like I say, in Jubilee. But when you get to that dynamic of like the Doctor and the Dalek, it's not actually that interesting. When I thought it wasn't that interesting. I thought what was more interesting was specifically the Dalek itself. The Doctor's relationship to the Dalek I don't find particularly interesting, but the Dalek I find interesting. Because you know where it's going to go. You know that he's implied to have been responsible for something. So obviously they're going to question his morals and stuff like that. But that's the primary point of it, right? I think that's fair to say. The primary point of this comparison is to say, well, actually, is he any better? Or is the Dalek any worse? Well, whatever it is. And obviously, yes, of course, the Dalek is, strictly a worse individual. Its morals are worse. But there's more of a blurring of the lines. And I understand that's being got at, but then, there are stories like Curse of Fenric, which better kind of capitalise on the Doctor's grey morals without needing kind of a simple character comparison. And there are stories like Remembrance that do a better job of portraying the ideologies of the Daleks and showing that no matter what, they are genuinely just evil. I just think that, I think that when you've got something like this, I think it's one of those things where on paper it sounds like a really strong idea, but when you go into it and you watch it, it's like, yeah, okay, I kind of could have guessed all of this without actually watching the episode. Yeah, but I would say you could put you could just put that basic concept, like you're saying, of is the Doctor any better than the villains in any Doctor's era. You could just do that. You could do this in a Matt Smith story, but the difference here is that this is 6 episodes into the series, 5 stories in, and we've seen him already better himself and open himself up, and because of his experience with Rose and everything that he's kind of been through, he's starting to open back up again after isolating himself after the war, and then this is there, I think, to go, no, this is still a battle-scarred character who isn't all the way bettered yet. He's still got so long, he's such a far ways to go on his journey, because instantly, as soon as he has the power, as soon as he is in a stronger position than the Dalek, he instantly goes, I'm going to kill it, I'm going to do this, which obviously is not the Doctor that we know, which I think that's where the meat of it comes from, because you could just put that question of, is the Doctor any better than the villains in any other era, but the interesting part for me comes from the fact that this is just after the Time War. The dynamic has changed. The Doctor was under the assumption that all of these guys had gone and died out, and he was the last one left. He has seen these creatures kill so many people. They are the source of his entire, of nearly all of his trauma that coming from the war, and this is him literally staring that in the face, and then asking the question, is he any better than them, because they both went through the same experiences.
Yeah,
that's where I find it interesting, because I do agree with you, if it was just any Doctor being asked that question, it wouldn't have the impact, but because it's Eccleston and because it's the Ninth Doctor after the war, and just when we think he's bettered, it pulls him back in to that dark, deep pit, and that's where I think the meat of it comes from.
I suppose the thing that I think is that I think when you look at an idea like that, you almost want it to be, it needs to be deep in order to be like valuable, right? And as an audience member now, who's, had a bit of life experience and things like that, I find it to be like a more valuable narrative. But that's partially because a big draw power of that narrative is that I'm imprinting my own experience on it as the audience member. But on its own, I feel like in order to stand up better, it needs to be a lot more deep. It's not actually that deep when you like look at it. It's just Doctor's angry because because these Daleks were responsible for the death of his people. He's going to go attack them. And then he kind of just stops. He kind of just gets a little bit of time away because Billy Piper needs to have a bit of time with the Dalek. And then, whatever. And he's sort of sat around. And it's like, well, now you've got the issue of, like, actually the subplot, which I prefer, of the kind of power thing, is now actually in the way. Because it's adding too much to this almost, Can you imagine this story within the context of something like set on Skaro, kind of in the style of Genesis of the Daleks? It's just the Doctor and a Dalek in like a trench or something like that. It would be much more confined and much more focused. Whereas with this, because you've got this whole bollocks of the museum, and you've got to also have Rose and her thoughts on it and all of this different stuff, it keeps it so it's only got a certain amount that you can go. There's only a certain amount of depth you can take it. I mean, and I just found it wasn't enough for me. It just isn't enough in that story. There's not enough of a draw for that.
I mean, I disagree that the Doctor just stops completely. He sees in that mutant what he's becoming, with that question of what the hell are you turning into? And that's where it hits him in the face, that he's like, oh shit, like this is what I'm becoming, and that whole and the museum as well. That's again fair. I completely disagree with the museum. That's one of the meta aspects that I was speaking about. The museum is when they find the Cyberman head in there. It's almost like this comment on the perception of what the original series became, where it's just this relic that's almost forgotten and has just been taken by people and put in museums and.
Yeah, it's what he says in it.
Yeah.
He says the stuff of nightmares reduced to an exhibit on getting old.
Yeah, exactly. And I love all that.
Sorry,
I think that's a very... And setting it in the museum, and then having this reinvention of the Daleks, I think the setting is really quite clever for that.
Is it really a reinvention of the Daleks, though? Let's be honest. It doesn't do anything that the previous Dalek stories have not done.
Yeah, but Gav, not everyone had seen the previous Dalek stories. A lot of the people's perception of the Daleks was still the Kit Kat advert that was like 2 years before this.
I get it. I get that, but it's still not a reinvention, is it? It's just, we're just showing that we're like, hey guys, do you know they do this? It's more like that. It's not like... Because I think Dalek has this kind of... There's this weird perception around Dalek where it's like... It was like this groundbreaking bit of television for the Daleks that they put the Daleks back on their map.
I think it is.
That sort of thing. I really don't think it is, to be honest with you. I completely disagree. I think it's just a story with a Dalek that isn't treated like a joke. And that's about it. Which other Dalek stories have done before. It just happened. The only reason it's important in that aspect is because of the timing, not because of the actual what it's doing. It just happened to come out at a time. Oh, we're bringing Doctor Who back. Let's do a serious Dalek story. It's nothing new. It's like when it's one of those things like when like the Dalek goes up the stairs and there's this weird. I see it around sometimes. A lot of people think it's the first time a Dalek's flown, or the first time Daleks conquered the stairs. I remember a few years ago there was a big discourse going around about how like Dalek broke the notion that Daleks couldn't climb stairs, which it isn't true. It's happened before. They literally climbed the stairs one Dalek story prior.
Yeah, but again, who's going to... general public, that's still the perception. Like, I still hear people still hear the general public saying, oh, Daleks can't get upstairs.
But it still isn't a reinvention. It's just coming at the right time, isn't it?
No, but
it's just, we've got all eyes on us. Let's do that remembrance thing again. Let's do that again. Hey, look, do you remember they did that? There you go.
Oh, it's not. It's not a member berries thing though. Like it's not just saying remember this, because now they have the technology to actually show it properly as well. Obviously, they have the technology to show it fully conquering the stairs. Whereas in Remembrance, obviously it does it, but it's still quite limited in what it can show, and it's not really that big of a moment within the overall. Piece taken as a whole, the piece of Remembrance, that's quite a small bit, whereas this whole episode is showing it's like a slasher film with a Dalek, and it's saying this one thing can just murder everyone in the space. What is it going to get to what's it going to do when it gets to stairs? It's this huge epic moment as it goes up the stairs, and it's just a different thing, and it's certainly more impactful than the one in fucking Revelation of the Daleks.
Well, yeah, obviously not like Revelation, but
like I said, just people were still under the impression that they couldn't do that, and unfortunately, like it's not a reflection of my thoughts on the era, but a lot of people had tuned out during the Remembrance of the Daleks, during the time when Remembrance of the Daleks had broadcast, and it was, I get it. It has to do this.
Yeah, I'm not like disagreeing with that. I'm more honing in on that idea of it being a reinvention. It's specifically that terminology and that idea, which I just what I think it is it's like a taster of like here's what Daleks kind of can be. I think it's kind of just it's a big flag that says look, take us seriously. And I think it works. I think it sells on that point, but I don't think it's not doing it because it's not doing it by being some sort of it's not some genius sat there going like right, let me just this is this groundbreaking way I've just figured out how to make the Daleks. They've just done what that's what I'm getting at. It's not like it's not a stroke of genius. It's just good timing, and it's just like we took. There's what I would say as a compliment is that it's sincere and honest in trying to attempt that portrayal.
Yeah.
So it's a very loving portrayal to the Daleks, of course, but it's and it understands what it's trying to tell the audience, but it's not doing anything new. Is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, but I'd say it's a new thing to show the power of one Dalek, like the one on its own.
Power. What about power of the Daleks? I mean, it's pretty much on its own. I mean, I know there's obviously more than one, but I mean, the devastation that tiny amount of Daleks brings.
Yeah, but that's on its own, and then it manipulates people, and then it goes and gets its mates. This is one Dalek killing everyone in the space.
I do appreciate that. Like, for instance, I was saying, I wrote here that, like, because there's, like I say, I want to be clear that there's a lot to like about this episode. For instance, like, I'll get to this later, but the fact that, like, the entire, like, the concepts, no matter how shaky I think they might be, do an absolute number to help the acting, because the acting is phenomenal all the way through this. But or for the most part, especially definitely in Eccleston's case, 100% perfect. But there's a scene, the very famous the sprinkler scene, where that Dalek obviously gets the TV on and lets the sprinklers go and annihilates everyone. And I have to say, like, for all my criticisms, all my slights, I think that's probably one of the most perfect scenes of a Dalek ever filmed. And that's a really great example of, like, yeah, this is how dangerous this thing is.
Yeah, it's incredible.
And I wish there was a bit more of it, you know?
Well, I mean, I think there is. Like, I just massacring everyone in the base.
That's true.
Like, I think there is a load of that. And I think it's incredible, and I think it is a stroke of genius that it manages to do this in 45 minutes, and it's this and
barely.
See, no,
it just gets away with it. If
this was padded out to a two-parter, it'd be way weaker. The fact that it's just this pure hit of adrenaline is what helps it, I think, because it's tight and it's claustrophobic and it's in and out. And you barely feel like you've made it out of there alive afterwards. Like, it's
I don't think it should have. Sorry, I don't think it should be a two-parter. I just think it should be maybe like an hour, not 45 minutes.
Yeah,
could have done with that extra 15 minutes.
That's fair enough, but I think this uses its length to its advantage. Like, I think it's fair fantastic. Yeah, and I mean, we'll go on to that big set piece scene with the Doctor and the Dalek. It's one of the greatest just bits of acting in Doctor Who ever. I think it's excellent.
Acting wise, yeah, it's great. Acting wise, it's great. There's a lot I can criticize in this, but I can't fault Eccleston at all in this. I think,
and just the dialogue as well, I think, is fantastic.
Everything, the dialogue is solid. I mean, this is the thing about criticizing a work like this when it's written by Rob Shearman, because I mean, he you cannot deny how great he is, how brilliant he is, and he does pull out some amazing lines. I mean, I think obviously we'll talk about the main scene, but I think the way it's partially down to the writing and obviously partially down to the performance, but the way Eccleston kind of starts the episode up until the point of meeting the Dalek, he's so muted and so kind of like tastefully like somber.
Yeah.
He's got this quieter demeanor to him, and then as soon as the anger builds up, it's this like really wonderful, like, I don't know what it is. It's a really, it becomes an electric performance, but to begin with, it's just this really like, it's really heartfelt. It feels very kind of
somber.
I don't know how to describe. Yeah, very somber. Really
it's
lovely.
Fantastic.
It's just what I really look for in Doctor Who. And regarding kind of Shearman and his writing, I think there's that. I think one of the most underrated lines in all of that script is when the Dalek goes and the coward survives. You know, I mean, I think it's such a. It's no one talks about that line. I don't see anyone talking about it, but it's such a genius line because it says, to my mind, it says a lot about the Daleks and it says a lot about the Doctor. It's a really like tight little. Like it's one line that just gives a lot of context to everything. So there are really good moments like that, and I don't want to like miss those when I'm talking about this.
Just that whole scene, like the whole scene where they first meet. The fact that it starts with him going into the mode of the Doctor that he's, at this point learnt to become over the last few episodes, and going, "I'm here to help. I'm the Doctor," and then the lights blink up, and you hear the familiar Dalek voice, and his face just drops. And it's oh my god, like goosebumps. And the fact that it's all in darkness and you just see the lights light up. And then when you actually get the reveal of the Dalek, and you get that shot that kind of turns round back onto the Doctor, and he's gone from the frame almost. Like we had that big shot where the Dalek's revealed. The camera turns around and he's already at the door, screaming to let me out, let me out.
Yeah,
that is incredible. Like
it's got a very It's moments like this that I do enjoy in series 1 where you're the resident Sam Raimi expert, but it almost reminds me of his stuff.
Yeah.
In the way that it's kind of got this very kind of grassroots feel to it. Like the cameras, it's very kind of how do you describe it? It feels, it's not low budget in a bad way. It's like that kind of, it's got that kind of run and gun film feel to it at times, and that's present a bit in Dalek. Just those swings and stuff. It's a bit like a Sam Raimi crash zoom, but its own sort of version of that.
Because it would have been easy. I
really appreciate.
Yeah, well, I mean, it would have been easy to just have a shot of the Dalek, then cut to another shot of the Doctor at the door. But the fact that the camera keeps going, and he's already out. Like he's trying to get away. He's trying to get out. He's already. It's just like you get the fear instantly, and even if you've never seen a Dalek before. Because again, first-time viewers who don't know what a fucking Dalek is, you instantly get the idea of, fuck, this is deadly. If this is how the Doctor's reacting to it.
I mean, poor bastards if that's the first Dalek you get to see, but we'll get to that.
Lucky bastards, more like.
Poor bastards.
Lucky bastards. It's amazing. Should we get onto the design then? Because this is like...
Yes.
This has been a long-standing thing, like since we met,
Christ.
And I don't get it. So please, wax lyrical about why you don't like this design.
So the Daleks are like an enduring design that goes through the ages, getting better and better and better. So you start with the Shawcraft models, which are pretty good. They're obviously the starting Dalek. But they have certain weaknesses, and they're just not, they have their certain faults. And through the years, through the combination of Raymond Cusick and all the various other people who work on it, the design gets refined and refined and refined. Such as like the shape of the skirt, the colouring, the slats, all these different things. The pupil, which I think is a magnificent inclusion to the Daleks, even though I think it's an accident. And all of a sudden... you just get this like, oh, you know what? What we're going to do is we're just going to go back to the 1960s, get a Shawcraft shape, rust it up, make it brown, dingy and grim. We're going to have this junky-looking Dalek, really like messed up thing. We're going to over-design it with all these stupid little in little lines and panels and things. It's like what the MCU does to superhero suits. It's just that all over this Dalek.
Oh, it's not as bad as that. I was listening to your points then. No, it is not as bad as the MCU.
It's not as bad. I wouldn't say it's as bad, but it's a comparable sort of sin. Do you know what I mean?
Fair enough. Carry on.
And I just think like everything that is great about the Dalek design prior to this, they're kind of this really interesting thing because of course the Daleks are these fascist war machines. So in part obviously they've got to look like tanks, but they've also got to look kind of like pompous. There's an arrogance to a Dalek design. It's why it's such a beautiful thing to look at. It's why there's so many people out there who are like myself who are such enthusiasts for like Dalek design, because there is some arrogance to how they present themselves, isn't there? And just to my mind, I cannot feasibly imagine the motivations for a Dalek, even during the Time War, to be like, right, we're going to war, let's make ourselves look like chunky and grim and bronze for some reason, and all of these just ugly features. And the blue light, I think, doesn't work with it either, because it's not as good as the white light, which is really piercing, or just no light at all. It's this really weird, like 2000s sci-fi feel to it. And the whole thing's just got this such extreme levels of muddiness to it. And it's like, it doesn't feel like a Dalek. It feels like, well, in say, in Revolution, when they designed the defense drones, and they're not really Daleks because they're being designed by someone else, but they're happening to take the features of a Dalek. But it's someone else's kind of, oh, this is my defense drone, and it ends up being a Dalek. It's kind of similar vibes to that, where it's not really a Dalek. It doesn't have that same air to it, and it's such a shame to my mind, because I think it makes a big difference to the journey the Daleks have been on thus far throughout the series. I think by, say, the 1990s in the comics, they've become this really interesting, pride-filled, like, renegade group just travelling the stars, you know, sleek and confident, but dying. And it's a really, really interesting thing. It plays on, if you've ever seen, like, you know, fascist, like, ideals, there's this really weird desires for, like, absolute kind of pristineness, even when they're doing horrific things. And it feels very true to their origins for them to be like that. And visually it makes sense. So to lose that, it just doesn't work for me. It breaks that whole arc. It breaks that whole visual direction the Daleks were going in. It breaks their stylishness, because they are. Let's be real, Daleks are stylish. I mean, we watched the Cushing films recently, and part of a big draw factor of that is simply how gorgeous the Daleks are, and that's kind of part of them. Yeah. It's part of what makes them interesting. They are kind of gorgeous. They're like, you know, they're like a really high-end car model. And this whole thing is, I think, really important to them. I think it plays a bit into their character. So I think losing that is a real mistake. And I understand the motivation. You want to make something that looks like it's been through a war. But really what you should have something that looks kind of past its prime, you know? Like, with some sort of colouring, and then past its prime. So, you know, for instance, a Dalek that's kind of sleek and colourful, but then maybe covered in rust because it's been, you know, through all this war. But it's just not. It's the whole implication of Daleks in the Time War is that they started out this way. They were manufactured and designed with the intention of looking kind of gross. And it's like, well, what's the point in that then? I don't know. It's a big pet peeve for me.
I mean, yeah.
Rant over.
So, I mean, yeah. So, I mean, like, one thing, I think, again, thematically, it fits to have it rusted and beaten up, because I think the whole thing is about relics and war stories, and the kind of this whole war has been forgotten about by the universe, but these two old relics remain, and it's just this shadow of what once was. And so I love that. I think that's why it needs to look grim and gross and beaten up.
Which is fine for the start.
Well, yeah, yeah. So secondly, I think the bronze colouring, I think the tank, because they turned it into a tank essentially. What fits better for a war? And I mean, you know, you look at these things, they blend in. They're dark, they're muddy, so they will blend into environments, you know. And they've got it looks like something built for a war. You've got the chunkier skirts. You've got that kind of, like you say, the slats look more like a tank. I disagree with the MCU comparison, because these actually look like they fit in naturally into the design, whereas I think you look at Spider-Man's suit in the MCU, it's got black lines put over it. This actually seems to fit naturally into the design. It again looks like something that could be used in a war. And thirdly, I would agree that I don't think these Daleks should be used now. I think they fit and they work really well in this era. And when the paradigms came along, that should have been it for them. They should have been usurped then. So I do agree, like, when you say now, like, why are the bronze Daleks here? Because I agree with that. They shouldn't be around anymore. They are a relic of we've done with the Time War stuff. The last time the Time War was a really, really big thing in the story of Doctor Who was 2013. It was nearly a decade ago. We're done with that now. So I do agree that these Daleks should be retired. But I think in this, I mean, you're going to hate me for this, but I don't think they could have done any better.
I think they absolutely could have done better, and they already did do better. And the reason I say that is because you think about, say, the 1970s, where we have Daleks introduced in, I mean, especially obviously Genesis of the Daleks. But these Daleks in the 70s, they're, I mean, literally even down to the colour, they're gunmetal grey for Christ's sake. And they're, you know, and they've got these, they're slats. I mean, look at them, they've got like mesh on top, and these slats feel like slightly separate to the rest of it. It's like real armour plating. Whereas the modern one just has these like weird, the slats are like built in, and there's just weird indents in it, and it just looks really bizarre. It doesn't look like it doesn't look like plating that's designed to resist anything. It just looks like it's got like a pattern on it. And like, again, grey is surely a more tactical colour than bronze. I mean, bronze is going to reflect everything. And on top of that, you've got episodes like Planet of the Daleks, where the Daleks have got some sort of rudimentary form of invisibility. So it kind of makes the whole camouflage argument redundant. With regards to the kind of the rusted aesthetic, of course they should look rusted at the beginning. But then I'd refer you to the Special Weapons Dalek, which does look rusted and beaten up and battered, but has a sense of beauty to it, you know? The gold and the white is still there, even if it's rusted over. That's a lot more Dalek to me. And I think that the reason I'm strong about it even in this episode is because the Dalek rejuvenates itself.
Yeah.
And upon rejuvenation, all it's done is become bronze. Whereas you would think that a Dalek, the last fighter of its race, with the sorts of ideologies that it has, you would think it would, be this, it would want to look glorious before its final battle. That's the sort of thing they were riffing off. That's where these ideologies tend to go. They're very, very based around that sort of thing. And I find it strange that there's all of a sudden this Dalek that has suddenly the Daleks have 180'd on all their ideas, and it's even weirder now in context, given we've had Time Lord Victorious, where the Daleks from the Dalek series, I believe, are implied to be before the Time War, if I've got that right, and they've got the shape, but even they've got the idea of the colouring right. I mean, surely, if anything, those are better colours too. Like, there's just everything about the design doesn't work for me.
Yeah, but
it doesn't make sense.
I think the episode would be. I don't think it'd have the power if like a bright yellow or red or gold Dalek was running around. I think the bronze helps fit the tone.
What about a grey one?
Grey one could work. Yeah,
I think Dalek's gunmetal grey is a classic, is a staple of their military ranks.
Yeah, but we've seen gunmetal grey before. Like, we'd never seen a bronze one before this. Like, why not try something a bit different?
Well, yeah, but at the same time, I suppose it's just, to my mind, like, what does that say about the Daleks? Does it say it implies that at the turn of the war, rather than I always think that in the Time War, one of the big things about the Daleks is that they just, as always, they just want to be supreme. Nothing really changes in their beliefs in the Time War, but that's kind of what makes them dangerous, is they're just constant. Their Daleks are like the one constant in Doctor Who. If the Doctor's learning and evolving, all the Daleks are doing is getting better at the exact same thing. And I just think, like, if you're on this progression, Daleks are really linear in that sense, why would you have a design that completely breaks convention in a way that doesn't feel natural to the motivations of the characters? Like,
yeah, but I don't think that it does break convention, because if you're in a war, yes, it's the Daleks, but at the same time, the universe never. This isn't just the war between the Thals and the Khaleds. This is a universe-spanning, time-spanning war. Like, if anything would get them to drop their ideologies for a bit, if anything would get them to, because they want to win, if anything would get them to drop that sense of vanity, it'd be that.
But then why would you just have that as like a general rollout? I would understand if, say, the Daleks were like, oh, we are just going to stay as we are in this war, and then maybe supplies get really, like, run down, and then they have to change. But then in that case, I'd say a better example would be something like the Recon Scout Dalek, which feels more natural to a Dalek in a wartime situation. Yeah. It just feels like a weird, like, aesthetic change for no reason. There are better examples.
I think there is a reason though. Like I don't think it's just they decided to do a Dalek that you personally didn't.
Well, yeah, I get that,
with.
but I just think the motivation. I think the design doesn't quite match the existing ideas that the Daleks have. Even in a case of something as big as the Time War, I could see the Daleks reverting, if anything. I couldn't see them changing in that way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, fair enough. But then, like, if say in like an alternate universe where you did really like this design,
I don't think it makes sense though.
Yeah, but like, say you really liked it and you find it gorgeous.
Yeah,
well, surely that still fits your belief that the Daleks would as well.
that's a good argument.
Like, is it not just because you don't like the design, therefore it doesn't seem...
But would you really describe that in relation to other Daleks as, like, gorgeous? I mean, it's very deliberately, like, shabby.
Some would. Like, I have seen it, like, referred to as, like, a really elegant piece of design work, but... I mean, it's not my favourite Dalek design, but
fair enough.
I do like it.
Maybe it is just genuinely my inability to see it as anything elegant at all. I mean, it's like there's a good scene of it in this.
Daleks have no concept of elegance.
Well, yeah, but they kind of do, Russell. They kind of do. And when the Daleks sort of...
Why are you saying Russell? It's Rob Shearman that wrote this.
No, but Russell wrote...
I know. I'm joking.
Yeah. No, but this I just think when you see him in this, there's a scene where the Dalek. You've said it yourself. These Daleks are just basically tanks.
Yeah.
And there's scenes where it rolls around and it really does feel like a tank. And sure, okay, it's a tank, but
I don't think it's intimidating.
Well, it is, but it's like not. It just doesn't feel like a Dalek. It's not. It's. I don't know how to describe it. It's just like, it's not got much in common with all the previous iterations. Like even like the movie Daleks, it's like they're different to the other Daleks that were like around at the same time. But principally, it's just one small change in the form of the headlights. The rest is basically the same. And even in later eras of the show, as the Daleks kind of their shape slightly changes or whatever it is, principally it's the same thing.
What about the special weapons Dalek though?
Well, then we're talking about special classes of Daleks, aren't we? Like Daleks that are like within special sex. But are we then turning around and saying, right, okay, so special weapons Daleks are now the blueprint for every single Dalek? I mean, why would that be? They're clearly outcast within the episode. In the book, they're considered abominations. I mean, what would,
but that doesn't look like a classic Dalek though. This looks like a classic. I'm not saying it's better, but I'm just saying like this would be more like a general rollout of Daleks because it looks like a Dalek. You've got the eye stalk. You've got the... No, it does. You've got the eye stalk, you got the lights, you got the plunger, you got the egg whisk. Well, just talking about it in the most basic terms possible.
But I could put an egg whisk and a plunger and an eye stalk on a pile of mud that's vaguely Dalek shaped. Does that make it a good Dalek design? I don't think so.
No, but this does look like a Dalek
shaped.
But this isn't just Dalek shaped. It looks like a Dalek.
Well, a lot of things look like a Dalek, but it's we're talking about something that genuinely has that same kind of all those principles that make it a Dalek. All the I hate to use the word, but the vibes that make it Dalek-like. It doesn't give me Dalek vibes. It gives me grunge tank vibes. It looks like there are artists out there.
Dalek.
There are artists out there who do lovely interpretations of Daleks in all sorts of interesting styles. They'll swap, say, the hemispheres for skulls or something really, gnarly and really cool. And as a work of art, I think it's awesome. But would I consider it, this is just a Dalek? I wouldn't really. No, not really. I could see it as like a one-off, maybe. I couldn't see it as like, this is now Daleks.
Yeah, but that's different. Like, this still looks, in principle, like a Dalek. It's just that, it's a different design, but it's not got skulls. It's still got the basic attributes of a Dalek.
I just find it so far removed. when you say it's got the basic, it's got like the most basic attributes. There's nothing like, I don't feel like it's got, it also like doesn't have, it doesn't have that nice follow through that the other designs have. So whereas previously the Daleks were an iterating species, they suddenly do this weird jump for this, which again is just weird for them. Like, everything about these Daleks just doesn't make sense in terms of design. Like, why? The big argument for them is that it's their wartime Daleks, but I frankly can think of 100 ways you could do wartime Daleks that feel more true to the design history of them. That's all I can say on it. I don't know how else to articulate.
Yeah, no. Fair enough. I just don't agree. Like, I think that's the thing. It's
fair
just,
enough.
It's just one of those things. Like, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure these Daleks are all going to appear a lot, because I was going to mention Dalek Sec, but I guess that's more of a series two.
That's just personal, Lewis. That's where we get personal. Dalek Sec. Oh. I'll have to recount that tale when we get to it.
Yeah.
When we get to there, I have a personal story with regards to Dalek Sec.
Okay.
It may be the root reason. You know when what's the name of the critic in Ratatouille?
Oh, Anton Ego.
Yeah, you know when Anton Ego kind of has all that. He's kind of he's kind of just become jaded and cynical because of things that happened in his life and whatever, and that's just given him a complete obstinance. I think my childhood story with Dalek Sec may be the reason I'm so passionate about these Daleks not being like Daleks.
Fair enough. One last thing I'll say on the Daleks though is like, it reminds me very much of like the various iterations of Michael Myers. Funnily enough, because Rob Zombie Michael Myers to a lot of people doesn't feel like Michael Myers, but I still find him fucking intimidating because he's massive. Yeah. And it's the similar thing with this. Like I find this Dalek fucking intimidating because he's chunky. He's a chunky boy, and he feels like a tank coming towards me. Do you know what I mean? But
I was going to say there are moments where it's shot and it looks like really heavy, and I do appreciate that. I think that looks good. Because sometimes with Classic Who, as much as I love the designs on a visual level, sometimes when they're being filmed, they're almost just a little bit too wobbly. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Where they look just a little bit too fragile. Whereas they're probably not that fragile, but they look it. Whereas this is shot in such a way that it doesn't look... It's something I would love to see classic Daleks get that sort of treatment.
And again, it's because technology had changed so much, and now the method of operating a Dalek was so much more advanced than it ever was. Yeah, so... Alright, so that was a, half an hour discussion?
It was a necessary one.
Yeah, that was a big old deep dive. But yeah, like Eccleston's absolutely fantastic throughout this. Like anything more you want to say about the I the big one that sticks out for me as well is the ending where he's about to shoot the Dalek, and he just trips over his words. The whole I couldn't, and his voice is breaking a little bit.
Yeah, it's a beautiful performance.
Oh, it's fantastic. And then the I win at the end.
Yeah.
It's so good.
It's for the Doctor. This is a great episode. For the Doctor, it's great.
It's and like I said, it's a turning point because it almost reverts him back to how he was before he met Rose, like this rageful, god again, which he started to redeem himself, and now this has kind of reset it back, which I think is really interesting. But again, it takes us into, I guess, talking about Rose this episode again, as the whole arc of the series, it's Rose who talks him down again. It's Rose who saves him there, but I don't think, and this is where we might disagree again, I don't think it's saying Rose is the all savior. Rose can save everyone from their trauma. I think it's just the general message of humanity and compassion, because that's what kills the Dalek in the end. It's the compassion that's been passed on to it, and that it can't handle the human empathy. I just think it's that saves the Doctor in this. It's empathy and compassion.
Which, by the way, is a really strange method of that happening. I appreciate, obviously, it's a very beautiful message. I'm not kind of denying the power of that message. It's very impactful. But the time traveler's DNA rejuvenated me, and I got a bit of Rose in me, and it made me nice. As a Dalek never considered that it might be in contact with another species. As a Dalek never considered that someone might in Planet of the Daleks, when they grab a Dalek and push it over into the ditch. Does that mean that if I push a Dalek into a ditch, am I then morally in the wrong because the second I've touched it, it's actually going to slowly become good? Am I now? So the second I touch it, does my choice to kill it suddenly become a condemnation of its death? It seems such a strange, arbitrary thing for the Daleks to suddenly be able to do: absorb compassion through physical touch.
But correct me if I'm wrong. That's not an involuntary thing, though, is it? He does it to escape. The Dalek does it to escape, and then I guess just didn't count on.
I suppose, yeah.
The empathy being transferred as well. I think because people touch Daleks again in the new series, and they don't absorb anything from them. I think it is just a.
But again, if that's something that a Dalek is capable of doing, surely you think about how you go all the way through the Daleks' history, right back to the 60s, and how intelligent they are. They're considered amazing, curious scientists, and then through to their kind of originally intended demise in evil, where they're able to isolate the Dalek factor and human factor. Surely they have more than enough information on this subject to suggest that perhaps doing that might come with that problem and perhaps try and solve it. Given the age of the Daleks.
But on instinct, if you were trapped up and being tortured by this American nutter, wouldn't you do kind of anything to...
Yeah, but if I had that built into me, bearing in mind I'm a soldier bred for war...
Yeah.
Wouldn't my kind of creators, as it were, the factory where the designs that made me into what I am, wouldn't they have probably considered this through the many battles they had been in beforehand? So when I was produced, I was already built with the idea of I can absorb energy from things, but because we've got all this stuff about the human factor and the Dalek factor, we've got all this stuff about what compassion is and all of this sort of thing, maybe we should do something about that. Maybe we should have some sort of fail-safe. Because surely he's not the first Dalek to have ever done that, because it's clearly some sort of mechanism that Daleks have.
Yeah, but I don't know, it just doesn't really bother me.
I find it weird, because it's because it's such a driving point for the plot. And on one hand, it's kind of again, this isn't something I would particularly concern myself with on a really casual viewing. But when I'm watching it for the podcast, and I'm thinking about these things, and I'm like, oh, hang on a second here. Does that really make sense for a Dalek? And when I think about it that way, I think, well, not really.
I mean, I don't know, because
Dalek doesn't know about the risks of absorbing. No way is a Dalek built in such a way that something it does could accidentally absorb human DNA, or absorb other DNA. I mean, the whole thing's racial purity.
Yeah. But
surely they've got some way of avoiding that.
I don't know. I mean, to me, it's never bothered me. I've got to say,
it bothered me. Because
I'm into the drama of it, and I'm into the. It's one of those things. If I'm into if the character drama is so good, things like that never. If I'm into it and I'm invested, little things like that almost never bother me.
I feel that way about things say. The McCoy era, when there's probably some inconsistencies, I just don't look at because I'm too invested in the rest of it. But I'm not as invested into this, if that makes sense. I think perhaps because it fails to capture me, properly, or this whole era doesn't capture me in that way. I notice these things more when I'm watching it.
Yeah.
I think if I was really, really into the character drama in this, which I think is good, But if I was really into it, like I am in, say, the McCoy era or something like that, or like, whatever, the McGann years, that sort of thing I would just overlook. But for this, yeah, I do notice it. It does irk me.
Fair enough. So we've spoken a lot about the Dalek in this.
Yes.
What about the supporting cast, and really, I guess, like Van Statten and his cronies and all them?
I think they're pretty good, you know. I think I've written the performance of Henry Van Statten. I think it's when he's saying about the definite life inside. He reminds me a little bit of Patrick Bateman in American Psycho. He's got that sort of like really like surface level materialistic view of things. I think he's one of the most interesting parts of the whole story.
He's a proper dick, isn't he?
He's really... I fucking hate him, but in the best way possible.
Yeah, Corey Johnson's fantastic.
It's just it's an outstanding performance, and it's an outstanding character in terms of writing. I do think that these things are just like, I just think that like, there's just so many. It's very satirical. A lot of the characters surrounding this drama are very like quite cleverly satirizing the points that the writers, Robert Sherman's, wanting to make.
Yeah,
and I think they work pretty well. They function really well in the script.
Yeah, it's great. And Goddard as well, I think, has got a memorable performance from Anna Louise Plyman. I think she's great. She's got a small role, but contrasting that character with Van Statten, I think it's a very interesting, because it would have been easy to make everyone on this base an unscrupulous shitheel. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
we already got that in Adam. Yeah.
Well, yeah. Should we get on to it?
Well, we will in a sec. I just wanted to make a quick point. The line she says at one point, I noticed it. I went back. It's just, this isn't really a criticism or anything. It's just a weird thing I noticed in the performance. She doesn't call it the Metaltron. She calls it the Mellotron. If you listen back to it, she calls it the Mellotron. She says, all guards converge on the Mellotron. And I just thought it was like, I heard it, I was like, the Mellotron? It sounded almost like the Melontron. And I was like, that's not what that is.
The Melontron.
But yeah, the Melontron. I just noticed it. It's one of those things I wanted to point out while we were on that subject.
Speaking about Van Statten, it has reminded me of the Davros reference, which I really like.
Yes, that is a good reference. I do.
It's brilliant.
It's so subtle, and it's a really I can't remember what he says exactly. He says, I don't remember. I thought
it's a man who was king of his own little world. You'd like him.
Yeah, that was it exactly. Yeah. And I just think it's I think it's really good.
It's so good.
It's a nice little, and it says a lot about Davros, to be honest with you. Like, stuff that hasn't. It's just clever. I like it.
It's really good, isn't it? It's just that's a great line. Adam, then, very controversial character, very controversial actor as well. But we won't get into that. We won't get into that. Now, Adam is somebody I want to talk about when we get to the long game, because I think my kind of defense for him is more in there. In this, it's kind of the start of his little character arc of being of the show, trying to say that not everyone is cut out for this life aboard the TARDIS. Not everyone is companion material, I guess. Yeah. Here, I think he works for what the episode needs him to be. Again, I like that the base isn't just full of unscrupulous shit eels, because he is a good guy.
Is he?
Ish.
He's a prick.
Yeah, but he's not. Do you know what I mean? He's not
the worst of them, I guess.
Exactly. And I like that. So yeah, what are your thoughts?
I don't know. I didn't really think much of him, to be honest, at all. I just thought he was kind of a non-character. He's just slightly vaguely annoying. In my notes, I just wrote his name in and drew like a picture of
like that really like dead inside Wojak, where it's like,
Yeah.
he's all like skull face. That's all I could think of because he's just obviously I'm thinking about the controversy with Bruno Lamy, but I think also like he's just I don't know. He's just there.
Yeah.
He doesn't add anything. He doesn't take anything away. He's just there.
This is the thing. Like I always, something that always sticks out to me is the level of hatred that people have for Adam.
Yeah.
And I never got it. Not because I didn't agree with him not being a good character, because I think I don't love him, but more for the fact that he's barely in the series. He's in 2 episodes, and I never got the level of vitriol that went his way.
Nah.
I never got it because he's only in it 2 episodes, and he's very much a side character in this. In fact, a lot of the time I can barely remember he's in it. So I always remember him from the long game, and that's where I remember him from, not this. So it's I don't know. I've never quite gotten. Like he's always on like lists of top 10 worst characters in Doctor Who, and I'm like, really? Like
he's just nothing. That's all there is to it. I mean, like I would say, for instance, that I prefer say Adric over him, but not because I'm just saying he's like really bad, but just because Adric, even if Adric is occasionally a worse character, I think Adric is more interesting, for instance, in the sense that just because he might be more, like, even if Adric's really bad, it's interesting that he's bad. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I know, yeah.
Adam's just nothing. He's just there. Like, there's nothing about him. He's like a really unmemorable, like, he's like the sort of character you would see a side character, an extra who gets a bit of scene. And then he does something and he goes away and you wouldn't really think of him. I don't know, he's very, very inoffensive as a character, I would say.
Yeah, that's what I think, and like I say, I'll talk about the long game when we get to it, because that's really where I remember him from, and that's where I think he has a point as a character, really. That's where I think the show wants to use him.
Yeah, I agree.
But yeah, so we've spoken a little bit about design already. Visual effects wise, I think this looks pretty great for the most part.
It's okay.
Yeah, I think I love the Dalek mutant animatronic.
That is really good.
It's really good.
Again, I'm not a huge fan of the design of it itself. I prefer the sort of absolute Lovecraftian horror that comes from classic Who ones. Whereas in the new series, it feels a bit more defined.
Yeah.
Up until the Whittaker run, where I feel like it returns to form again. They look amazing in the Whittaker era, but
that is true.
But they're not as good. They're probably not that it's a particularly I don't think this is a particularly huge deal out there, but I think they're probably the worst looking mutants. But that doesn't really. I don't think that's a particularly big deal. They're okay, and they work. I think it works particularly well in this one, given that he has the little eye and stuff, because it makes him quite emotive.
And he's meant to.
Later on, I don't know if it makes much sense for the Daleks, but it makes sense for the characterization, I think.
Yeah, no, I agree. Here we go. Music. I love the music in this. I think the track, The Lone Dalek, is just beautiful piece of music. A lot of the music, I think, is exactly what. I love the theme for the Dalek. I love the that. It reminds me of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. The sound effect from that weird thing. Love it. I don't have any complaints. Over to you. Oh, actually, just one more little thing as well. I also think that Murray Gold knows when to, and this may have been an editing choice as well, but I think there's a very much they know when to pull back, like on the you would make a good Dalek, and it's just the soundtrack doesn't come in and overpower anything. There's a subtle little bit just after that, but it lets it lie, and I think it's a wise choice.
I think it's a mixed bag of music. I think over the years, the Dalek theme itself it's not called The Dark and Endless Night, is it? It's the other one. I think it's just called The Daleks, isn't it?
Yeah, it really comes into play during the
I was going to say it's grown on me, but it feels
feels like it suits the vibes of the finale more than it suits the
Yeah,
bass.
I agree.
It's a little weird here, but it's not. It certainly caught me out. I was like, hang on, this doesn't quite feel right. I think I find that the only reason I'd point it out is because I know Murray Gold before has done things where he's taken a version of one of his themes and like toned that leitmotif down for a different type of scene, and I'm surprised he didn't do that here. Perhaps it was due to budget or time or something like that, but I think it might have worked for him to have just, for instance, the bit where the Dalek's being shot at, and that's when the music comes in, I believe. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah.
When they're showing the bullets.
I think so.
I think it's a slight misstep. I think it would have been better if they just had that, like, just the pulsing sound at the beginning.
Yeah.
Yes. It's intense, but it just doesn't quite work for me. It's a little, at times, a bit melodramatic. The bends, you're absolutely right. Those little twinges and bends are superb. I have no complaints with that.
I have a lot of just coming in there with that. I have a lot of nostalgia for that. Like even now, when I think of the Daleks, I still think of that weird like when it.
To be fair to you, it's actually kind of classic Who of them.
It's great, and they use it a lot throughout this. Like it carries throughout the whole RTD era. Just that little sting.
Yeah,
and
it should really. They should have kept it. If they're gonna keep the fucking designs, they should have kept this music to go with them at least.
Yeah, it's great.
I'm really surprised they ditch it. But the other thing is the one problem I have is there's these random bits where horns come in. Like I really don't understand the usage of horns in this. There's like trumpety bits. I think it's like, for instance, when just before the Dalek does that beautiful sprinkler scene, there's like this dun dun bit, and it's like what the hell? Like it's so weird. Like it just feels like something out of some sort of like campy '60s like TV show, science fiction TV. It's just weird. I don't really rate it. And the music when Rose is trapped and there's music playing, I think it just sounds shite. Like the music at that point is shocking when Rose is trapped. I think it would have been better with no music at all.
Oh, see, I love that.
Or just the bending kind of.
No, I think that's great. I think it really adds to the emotion. Do you mean when she's at the door and they're saying, she's 19 years old?
I think it's shit. I love it. I think there are better themes there. For instance, Rose's theme might have been good there, or like a more like sad version of it would have been good.
I think it is quite.
It doesn't feel right for me. It just feels a bit shit. But I mean, this is probably like got some of the best moments in Murray Gold's entire musical career here, in the sense that you got those bends spot on. But for the most part, it's kind of typical him, where it's just not very good. But yeah,
I love it. But then I love Murray Gold anyway.
I really don't like Murray Gold, so I do appreciate when he does something decent.
Yeah, there you go. We've kind of touched on it already, but I think the direction in this is gorgeous again. I think it's Joe Ahern, and Joe Ahern is a brilliant director for Doctor Who. Mr. TARDIS did a shot-by-shot breakdown of this episode, and I highly recommend that because he kind of breaks into a lot of the subtleties in the shots, and I think the direction in this is absolutely fantastic.
You can't fault it. There's so many like little bits as well. I think.
Yeah.
I think I can't really complain about that. I think, for instance, there's very simple but effective shots, like when the Doctor looks at the Cyberman and the Cyberman's face, the reflection of the Cyberman's face is kind of superimposed on the Doctor.
Yeah, things
like that are good themes. And by the way, it's quite a sad thing to see that Cyberman helmet, knowing that the Cyberman will never look that good again. But anyway,
but isn't it great that it is an invasion Cyberman? Because wait, isn't it? It's a revenge Cyberman, one, isn't it? Yeah, it's a revenge one. Yeah. In which case, ignore me. I was going to make a point there, but
I hope it's the same one that that actor wore in that great shot of the Cyberman smoking.
I hope so.
I hope so.
Yeah.
That's a replica, let's be real.
Anything else before the trivia? Because I'm pretty much done gushing.
Rose Tyler's probably worth talking about in this. I
thought we pretty much touched on it.
There was one thing I wanted to say, and that's even outside of me not liking Rose, I actually unironically think this would have been a great death episode for Rose, because obviously the big part of this story is the journey the Doctor goes through, And I just wonder, like, obviously with the following dark tone of it all, whether the loss of Rose would have been like a really good character moment for him at that point.
See, I think he would have gone off the rails completely. I think he would have just gone on a mad one.
Well, I think he could have had that moment where, like, he's got to think about it. He's got to be like, hang on, all this progress I've made, how disappointed would Rose be in me, sort of thing.
Yeah, that's true.
I just think maybe the death of Rose would have been an amazing point for this story.
See, happened. It would be cool, but I don't think her arc's done. I think the arc for Series 1 is about Hope kind of coming through and regaining hope, and I think it'd be...
I get it, but as the miserable old bastard of the podcast, I would like to suggest that Rose should have died in this episode, because I think it would have been interesting for the character.
Fair enough. Should we get on to some trivia?
Let's do it.
So the big one, I think most people do know, is that initially they weren't actually sure if the Daleks would be available here. Because the Terry Nation estate had initially refused. So they wrote a treatment, and then they had to write a second version of the script, because they didn't know if they could get the rights to the Daleks. So they wrote an alien that was almost like a child who was just killing and killing and killing, and that became the Toclophane.
Oh, damn. Yeah, I think I've heard of that, yeah.
You must have heard this, yeah. So this was going to be a Toclophane story, and the Toclophane were going to be the Dalek in this, which I think is interesting. And then they reused that concept in Series 3, which is... I know, I find that interesting. I find it creepy, the fact that this a child and everything, but yeah, I thank God they got the rights to the Daleks, I think. But yeah, also the Doctor's interaction with the Dalek was originally written to be mocking and flippant, but it was actually Christopher Eccleston's idea to give it the rage and the anger.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Robert Shearman actually went against this initially. Initially he was like, no, that's not what I wrote. This isn't my intention. I don't like it. But then when he saw the episode, he came around to it, and he was just over the moon that he was kind of talked down in that scenario. Which
Fair
I think
enough.
is interesting.
I think I prefer the Doctor being flippant, but I can understand why in the context of 9 that works, and especially given Christopher Eccleston's performance, I think,
Yeah.
It's an understandable thing on both sides.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, there's all sorts of Easter eggs in the museum. So of course we see the Slitheen's arm. You can just make out what I think is meant to be a war machine in the big wide shot, but I'm not sure. It's like a square shape, and I think it's not really confirmed whether it is or not. But it's the big wide shot of the exhibit. But yeah, there's also something that looks a bit like Omega's head from Arc of Infinity.
Yeah, I saw that.
Again, I'm not sure if it's meant to be. There's something that would be used in Dreamland. You remember Dreamland? And it fits into the whole arc of the Men in Black that would go into the Sarah Jane Adventures as well. Yeah. There's that MacGuffin is in that exhibit. That circular thing, which is interesting. Also, the 2012. Yeah, go on.
Sorry, there's something in here. I'm looking at the shot at the moment. There's something here that looks like sort of Metatraxy looking thing. If anyone's...
I'm not gonna lie, it could be.
No one's put a Metatraxy in there, but shout out to all my homies who know what a Metatraxy is.
Yeah, for real.
One of Doctor Who's finest recurring villains.
One last thing before the scores, isn't it weird that 2012 was now 10 years ago, yet when this episode went out, it was like, oh yeah, 2012 in the future.
I felt so weird watching that. When they
Isn't
were like
it
that,
weird?
I was like, I'm more advanced than the technology they present in this.
It's gonna be the same thing when we get to fear her.
Yeah.
Right. So, yeah, that's
weird.
Bloody weird. Okay, so scores. This is gonna be interesting.
Yeah.
I would give Dalek a 9 out of 10. I think it's the best so far. I think it's a fantastic story. I think it's emotional. It's intimidating. It's scary. It's a slasher movie featuring a Dalek in 45 minutes. I think it's Eccleston's best performance in the role, maybe outside of the finale. I think the finale is up there with him as well. I I could talk a lot about my love for this thing, but I love it. And now you.
I've given it 3.5.
Oh my
and
god!
And I think it's the worst episode so far. I think all the other ones are like solidly average, and I think all the rest of them are like, they're not particularly offensive in any way. They're just doing what they're doing, and I rate the experimentalism. But this, I just feel I don't get anything good out of this. I appreciate
anything
those bits.
good.
There's 3 points for a reason. There's 3 points for those. The 3 goes towards good things, but everything else I just don't. Like, yeah, I don't like it. I think it's the worst so far.
I thought you were going to go low, but I thought you'd go like 4, 4.5, 5. Not
Nah,
3.5.
I prefer Aliens in London World War 3. Actually, I'd rather watch that than this.
I mean, I like Aliens in London, but
I seriously think it's objectively a better story.
fucking hell,
Which is not something I thought I'd say, but yeah, here we are.
that is insane. But fair enough. That's what this podcast is about.
Yeah.
So, on that bombshell, should we wrap it up?
Let's do it.
You have been listening to the Polarity podcast with the human beings designated Lewis and Gav. Next week we will partake in the long game. You will listen to the podcast on Spotify and YouTube and can find us on Twitter and Instagram. You will find links in the description of whatever service you are listening to this on. You will obey. Thank you for watching. Bugger off.